It used to be said that when the US catches a cold, South America suffers influenza. How times change. Today it's China that has the cold and Brazil is flat on its back. Latin America's biggest economy, which has fallen into its steepest recession since the Greatest Depression, has been hit by a triple whammy. Slower Chinese growth has hit the prices of the commodities that Brazil produces and exports. A multi-billion-dollar corruption scandal at Petrobras has reached the very top of government, and a building political crisis has made governing Brazil difficult, especially in a way that can address these problems effectively. However, it's not all China's fault. The problems of Brazil's Pacific neighbours, such as Chile and Colombia, which are also commodity exporters, are nothing compared to its own. Indeed, Dilma Rousseff now ranks as the most unpopular president in Brazilian history. Why? Well, for one, there's a sense amongst Brazilians that their future has literally been stolen, thanks to the Petrobras scandal, which saw politicians kick back millions of dollars to construction companies in return for contracts. And the situation's likely to get worse, unfortunately, before it gets better. This year, the economy is expected to shrink by 2% as unemployment rises and investment collapses, in part because of the Petrobras scandal. Interest rates have meanwhile reached over 14% to beat inflation. On the political side, things are a little better. The Petrobras scandal could yet claim scalps of senior government figures, which will in turn make handling the government coalition even harder. And that in turn will make it trickier for the government to push through necessary spending cuts. These are required because otherwise sovereign debt could face a downgrade, which would lead to more money and investment leaving. But before you hit the despair button, it's not all bad. The situation is far better than in Argentina or Venezuela. In particular, Brazil's corruption probe shows that some of its institutions are working. And on the economy, meanwhile, the devaluation of the currency by a third is starting to feed through into better exports and external account figures. Still, that's just managing the situation. To make it better in the long term, Brazil needs to do two things. First, change a political system where there are lots of micro-parties, which in turn leads to graft and return for favours, and unmanageable coalitions. The problem is Congress needs to make those changes, and turkeys don't vote for Christmas. And second, Brazil needs to cut an immense amount of waste from its bloated public sector. The trouble here, of course, is everyone agrees this needs to be done, just not so long as it's to their own perks. Paul Rathbone, Financial Times, London.